hard to predict the weather, but I'll just show you what I do, and other people I know have used other resources to advantage too. And I try to fold in some of the other different possibilities here. But let's just go on to the next slide. Some of these are just cribbed from the presentation that we had about the weather forecasts at the Gray's briefing on yeah, day before yesterday. Um, so anyway, so I was saying, let's just talk about the weather yesterday, the Canadian transfer. Well, you don't have to go into this. You know what happened. Next slide. Okay, this just shows the U.S. National Weather Service is one I often go to first, and it's only because they have predictions a week in advance. So you can look at these cloud cover maps, and it gives it's shaded with bright light blue is clear, and gray areas are cloudy, but they actually have the sort of the cloud probability. It's not really cloud cover, but it's a probability of clouds, cloud cover sort of in the sky for different cities. And you can see even early on that West Texas was favored over Oklahoma. But this was actually for the night before the event. But you can sort of see how things change, and they do as you get closer to the time. Some of the other people say you really can't predict the weather 7 days in advance, and that's pretty right, but sometimes the weather is stable enough that you can get a good idea even that far out. Next slide. Next thing I go to goes up to 5 days before, and Andy Cool, who runs this website from Adelaide, um, says that's really as far as he's comfortable with running these maps. And his idea is what you should do is look at these maps and not really say for sure that's what's going to happen, but at least you can watch the trend, how the maps change from one forecast to the next. And the forecast is updated I think every 6 hours or every 12 hours. Um, so the the maps are just a representation of the 7-timer forecasts that are used by Occult Watcher and by Occult. And the forecasts that Andy has, the Skippy Sky site here, has maps covering North America, Europe, and Australia. Um, but he will add other maps temporarily upon request, and you'll actually often see with the other areas listed, there will be an IOTA map that I've requested, like when we went to Indonesia and some other places that were um, away, um, or New Zealand even. He doesn't have, I'm surprised he doesn't have New Zealand, covered, but he did cover it for us while we were there. Next slide. Okay, let's hope he gets in. um, okay. So the next slide is the Canadian weather forecast for astronomy, and the way the pictures have, that's why I put my laptop on it. It covers up the printing, which gives the website there. This is what Clear Sky Clock or Clear Dark Sky, whatever you want to call it, is based, and people use that for their fixed observatories. They have these bars that show the cloud cover, but for mobile planning to observe a not a graze or an asteroid occultation at some other place, you don't want just a point source prediction. You want a prediction for the whole area, and that's what we're showing here. And I often use this transparency prediction because it covers the whole continent, at least U.S. and Mexico. Or U.S. and Canada. That's one problem with the Canadian forecast. They really cut off Mexico too much. If people, like Rock Fleischman down in Baja, can't use these very well. But they are covered by the Skippy Sky. Um, so, but they have, but it's the forecast for astronomy, which is good. I mean, this is a forecast of transparency. So if it's white, those are cloudy areas, and there are other areas, even if it's clear, at least he shows what sort of haze conditions are expected, um, or very thin cirrus. And then next slide shows the one of the cloud cover maps, but they're for, in quarters, northeast, southwest, so forth. And this is the southeast U.S. They call it eastern and western U.S. and Canada. Um, so, so this just shows how, it was forecast to be mostly cloudy across Oklahoma. This is why we went to Childress here, which looked like a little better. And we actually did see quite heavy clouds in the north from our site at Cary. As soon as the sun started coming up, we could see that, but fortunately they didn't make it as far south as us. Next slide. Okay, this just shows the western. There's the eastern U.S. This is the western U.S. showing its coverage. Next slide. And it shows a little more detail than the transparency forecast, so that's useful to look at the cloud cover. Um, and then they also have three different forecasts for weather, the conditions at ground level. And this is the humidity one, which is useful to know if you need to need dew protection. And all the red area here, it's very wet, and so you high humidity, and you're probably going to have dew, possibly ground fog. And you can see that was the condition across here, but I'm sort of surprised they had one little thing of humidity over us, but it was really dry. It was more like this, you want the blue conditions like the desert where it's low humidity. Um, um, this is for 10 hours UT, but it was forecast modeled 22 hours in advance. So that's the other number you also want to see is how many hours in advance was um, was the forecast relative to the time of the event. Yeah. So of course the lower the better, but then you have less time to make decisions. Um, so often if you make a plane flight, you have to cancel it 24 hours in advance, and especially getting your preparations ready to pack up suitcases and everything. You really need to know. Um, so usually I arrange things so that at least I can see these first charts that come out 48 hours in advance. Next slide. Besides the humidity, they also have the Canadian sites also have temperature, and I mean they also have an atmospheric, astronomical seeing conditions forecast too. And they have also wind. You can check for wind, and that's can be an important factor for what you want to do. And of course, if it's windy, then even if it's a little bit humid, you're probably not going to have dew as much. So wind actually helps you sometimes. Then the next, I just show these that Brad Brad Timerson, um, showed these but it's something you have to pay for. So Brad has mentioned here it's a service he pays to receive, and I haven't. I think maybe I will do that myself just to be able to get these. Um, it's run by this Weather Bell Analytics and quite detailed. It has a um, tiles showing the county boundaries. There's some that also you can overlay the roads, but the Skippy Sky um, and the Canadian forecast just have the state boundaries. They don't have the more detail like is shown here. but for forecasts, you really can't tell much more than what goes on within different parts of states generally. But next slide. I don't know. Brad can tell us. $25 a month. Okay. So yeah, it's kind of pricey. Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is another. Um, I don't know if Brad will have to answer where this comes from. It's another additional thing. I think it's a more proprietary part of. It looks like a weather bell map. Yeah, it is Weather Bell, but he says it's copyrighted, whereas the other, I guess, is not. You can pay for it and then kind of share it on a website or something like we did for the Aldebaran and Grays. I've shared this one too, but hope we didn't step on anyone's toes. Um, but the forecasts are a little different. You can see they predicted clear conditions across Oklahoma than the other forecasts did. So it's useful to look at these different models. And finally, show the next one. Now this Medio Blue is run out of Europe, and so they concentrate mainly on Europe, but it uses the different European forecast models than the U.S. models, so it gives a different answer. But they also cover North America and I believe Australia with some of their maps. They have maps like this for the U.S. Um, but what I find useful about the Media Blue site is for major cities, they have an option to show the forecast from several different forecast models, the North American models, their models, and some others. So there are about 6 or 7 different forecast models, and they'll tell you for the city whether it's partly cloudy and so forth. I think they give data for 3-hour intervals, but just for the major cities, like this event that we tried to observe in North Carolina, we were near Jacksonville, and they didn't have one for Jacksonville, but they did have one for Wilmington, which wasn't too far away. And so at least you can get an idea of the differences between the different models. But that's all you can tell. I mean, the weather will do what it wants. um, so you know, so anyway, okay, Brad continues to mention here he checked and it was okay to use. The GFS model that the main one that WeatherBell uses is the American model, and ECMWF is the European model. But it's usually a little bit better, and I think that's why the Medio Blue forecasts, maybe are sometimes a little better. Yeah. So.
David, could I add just a
Sure.
comment here on a situation of this week? I can't remember which week it is. Okay, this is a wonderful lesson in weather, and Oliver, I hope you and Barbara are paying attention. That's my steerage back there. I look at 2 things. Paul Maley stuck it on my computer about 15 or 20 years ago, I don't know, and that's aviationweather.gov. It's very alive and lasts through the night. Apparently it looks at high clouds and whatnot. Now the curious thing about that cloud cover in Oklahoma is that the clouds tend to circulate around Stillwater, Oklahoma. There is either a concentration of clouds in Stillwater or there's a big hole there. And our night there was a big hole there or coming up. It's done in 15-minute intervals so you can see the direction of the cloud formation. And that was the first thing I looked at to go out Thursday night, Friday morning. It's very fuzzy. The second thing I looked at, of course, was what all of you taught me, which was Clear Sky Clock. But Clear Sky Clock is updated about every 12 hours. Yes. And it looked really bleak early Thursday night, and the last update before we went out said that we would have a little clear spot for what we were about to do, and then it was going to move in. And as we turned around and left, got all of our telescopes back in the car and drove away, we looked back in the mirror and the clouds had just occluded the moon. it disappeared. So it was kind of wonderful, but those are the two things that I do, being a kind of simple weather person.
Right, right. The other thing I didn't put in this presentation, I mean, these are only forecast models, but what you also want to do the night of the event is look at the satellite images. Especially, if it's night, you be sure to look at the infrared, and you want to look at the color pictures. The black and white are somewhat hard to interpret sometimes. Um, but um, and especially during the day where the cloud is clearly visible, you want to look sort of late in the afternoon and see how it compares with the clear sky clock model, the Canadian model, or the other different things. And you can get an idea of whether the clouds are moving in a little more quickly than the forecast models or not. And so you can make some last minute decisions then, just as you leave to drive to where you need to go. Um, the and the weather, the forecast I use is www.rap.ucar.edu/weather, and they also have ground reports. Sometimes it's useful to look at ground reports too, because they'll tell you if the sky is covered with low clouds that don't show up well with the infrared, um, and um, and so forth. And Jay Anderson pointed out another website which run out of some place in Illinois, a university there, that shows some of the same things that the UCAR site does, but they have tiles that you can overlay showing roads, the major highways, which is useful. Okay. Um, okay. Um, yeah, yeah. Now, was it clear and still during the occultation, or had everyone moved south and west? 19 miles south of here, and just a few of us, traveled southwest to get into the drier conditions. But it was clear for the grays south of Stillwater, and as Art said, thick clouds moved in just 10 minutes or so after the grays, and then they didn't see the moon, I think, the rest of the night. So, well, it was pretty cloudy. I think the truth was somewhere between the ECMWF forecast and the other one. Um, but although it was mostly cloudy during the grays, but it was clear in the 20% of the sky where the moon was, and that was the important thing. Um, and um, and Bob Sandy had even better luck with worse cloud cover northeast of Tulsa, and he had a clear break, was there and was able to get it. Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, of course, everywhere to the southwest of Oklahoma City or so, it was pretty clear. Yeah, so Hal Povenmire went the farthest was near Lubbock, so another 2 hours southwest of where we were, near Childress. Um, so. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. 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 Very good. Yes, we were really lucky. Okay. Great. Okay.